The first time my wife called me unstable, she didn't say it in our kitchen. She didn't whisper it during an argument. She said it under oath, in a courtroom, with our daughters sitting behind her. She looked at the judge and said, "Calm and steady. He's not safe. He's unstable." And for a moment, I almost believed her. Because when someone repeats a lie long enough, it starts to sound like concern. But then the judge asked her one question, just one, and everything shifted. If you've ever been quietly rewritten as the villain in your own life, stay with me. What happened next wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it changed everything. The courtroom smelled like paper and old carpet. Not dramatic, not intimidating, just tired. I sat at the table beside my attorney, hands folded, trying not to bounce my knee. Across from me, Laura looked composed, navy blazer, hair pulled back, the version of her that people trusted. We'd been married 12 years, separated for 8 months. Today was supposed to be routine, temporary custody review, clarify schedules, set boundaries. Instead, she looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, I believe my husband is emotionally unstable. I'm concerned for our daughter's safety." The word unstable hung in the air longer than it should have. I felt heat rise in my chest, not anger, something closer to disbelief. My attorney, Daniel Reeves, leaned slightly toward me. "Don't react," he whispered. I hadn't planned to. Laura didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. That would have looked rehearsed. Instead, she kept her tone soft. "He's been unpredictable. Mood swings, withdrawal, paranoia." Paranoia? That one almost made me laugh. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with tired but sharp eyes, looked down at her notes. "Mr. Carter, have you ever been evaluated for mental health concerns?" "No, Your Honor." Laura shifted slightly in her seat. There it was, the first crack. Because this wasn't about something documented, it was about something suggested. 8 months earlier, when Laura asked for separation, she said she needed space. No mention of instability, no mention of safety, just space. Then, 3 weeks later, she filed for primary custody. That's when the language changed. Suddenly, I was distant, hard to read, not communicative, then emotional, then volatile. Each word just vague enough to avoid specifics. Daniel stood. "Your Honor, may I clarify something?" The judge nodded. "My client has no record of psychiatric treatment, no police reports, no documented incidents of aggression. These claims are recent and coincided with custody filings." Laura's jaw tightened slightly. Only someone who knew her would notice. The judge turned back to her. "Mrs. Carter, can you provide specific examples?" There was a pause. Not long, but noticeable. "He isolates. He shuts down. Our daughter gets confused. He won't answer calls sometimes." "That's not instability. That's marital breakdown," Daniel said calmly. The judge raised a hand gently. "Let her answer." Laura inhaled slowly. "He accused me of manipulating finances." Now I felt it, that flicker of something deeper. Because I had. 3 months before she filed for custody, I noticed small withdrawals from our joint savings. Nothing dramatic, just consistent. When I asked, she said they were household adjustments. When I pressed, she cried. I backed off. In court, she framed it differently. He became obsessed with our accounts, checking every transaction, questioning me constantly. "Did he threaten you?" the judge asked. "No." "Did he ever harm you physically?" "No." "Verbally?" She hesitated. "He raised his voice." The judge looked at me. "Did you?" "Yes," I said, "during arguments." Laura's attorney leaned forward. "Your Honor, emotional instability doesn't require violence. It can manifest in unpredictable behavior patterns." The word unpredictable again. Daniel slid a thin folder toward the judge. "Your Honor, my client voluntarily completed a psychological evaluation 2 weeks ago." Laura's head snapped toward me. That wasn't something she expected. The judge opened the document slowly. Silence filled the room. The clock ticked on the wall behind her. I stared at my hands. I hadn't told Laura about the evaluation. I didn't think it would matter, but something about the way she'd been building this narrative felt strategic. The judge adjusted her glasses. "Dr. Feldman's assessment states Mr. Carter presents no signs of clinical instability. In fact, it notes elevated stress due to prolonged conflict and perceived reputational damage." Perceived reputational damage. Laura shifted in her chair again. The judge closed the folder gently. "Mrs. Carter, when did you first believe your husband was unstable?" Another pause. "After he accused me of hiding money." "And were you?" the judge asked. The question was soft, almost casual, but it landed like a dropped glass. Laura blinked. Her attorney spoke quickly. "Objection, financial matters are separate." The judge didn't break eye contact. "Answer the question." Laura's lips parted slightly, then closed. "No," she said. The judge nodded slowly. Then she leaned back. "I see many custody disputes. I also see when language escalates in timing with legal filings." Laura goes very still. The judge continued. "You described mood swings, isolation, financial suspicion, but no documented harm, no medical reports, no third-party complaints." Laura swallowed. Then came the question, just one. "Mrs. Carter, if your husband is unstable, why did you leave your daughter alone with him every weekend for the first 4 months after separation?" Silence. Not dramatic silence, real silence, the kind that stretches. Laura didn't answer immediately because there wasn't a prepared answer. Her attorney whispered something urgently. The judge waited, and for the first time since this started, I saw something shift in Laura's expression. Not fear, calculation. She hadn't expected that question, and neither had I. I looked at her across the courtroom. For 12 years, I thought I knew how her mind worked, but in that moment, I realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't about fear. It wasn't about safety. It was about control. And the judge had just stepped directly into the gap she hadn't sealed. Laura finally spoke. "Because I was trying to protect my daughter from instability without escalating conflict." It sounded rehearsed, but thinner now. The judge nodded once, slow. Then she glanced at the financial documents Daniel had quietly added to the pile. "I think," she said carefully, "we may need to examine the full context before labeling anyone unstable." Laura's composure didn't break, but her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. And in that tiny movement, I understood something I didn't want to admit. This wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the middle. And if the court started asking the right questions, it wouldn't just be my stability on trial. It would be hers.
The hearing didn't end with a ruling. That was the first thing that unsettled Laura. The judge adjusted her glasses and spoke in a tone that sounded almost gentle. "Given the claims raised today, I'm ordering a temporary financial review and a custody evaluation. Both parties will cooperate fully." Temporary, review, evaluation. Neutral words, heavy weight. Laura nodded as if she expected it, but her shoulders were tight. I noticed because for 12 years I had read the smallest shifts in her posture. As we stepped out of the courtroom, the hallway felt colder than it had that morning. She didn't look at me. Her attorney spoke quickly beside her, voice low, controlled. I caught only fragments. Narrative. Stay consistent. Don't react. Daniel leaned toward me. She wasn't prepared for that question. "No," I said. He studied my face. "You weren't either." He was right. Outside the courthouse, Laura finally stopped walking. "You blindsided me," she said quietly. With what? The evaluation. I kept my voice steady. You blindsided me with unstable. Her lips pressed thin. This isn't about us, she said. It's about our daughter. It became about that when you used that word. For a second, her eyes flickered. Not guilt, something closer to irritation. You're proving my point, she said. You get defensive. I get defensive when I'm accused of something untrue. She inhaled sharply, then stepped back. We'll let the professionals decide. That sentence didn't sound like confidence. It sounded like distance. That night, I sat alone in the apartment I'd rented after the separation. One bedroom, neutral walls, furniture that still didn't feel like mine. The silence pressed against my ears. I opened my laptop and reviewed the bank statements again. I had told Daniel about the withdrawals 2 months ago. He said not to escalate it unless it became relevant. Now it was relevant. Small transfers, every 2 weeks, always under $1,000. Not reckless, measured. I called the bank and requested a detailed breakdown. The woman on the line hesitated. Sir, those transfers were initiated online. I know. From a device registered to your household. My household or my wife's phone? Pause. From a device associated with your wife's login credentials. I felt something tighten in my chest. When I confronted Laura months ago, she said I was imagining patterns. Paranoid. That word again. The next morning, I received an email from the court-appointed custody evaluator, Dr. Karen Holt. Professional, neutral. She requested individual interviews, joint observation, and a review of communication logs. Communication logs. I scrolled through months of text messages between Laura and me. Most were logistical, pick-up times, school updates, doctor appointments. But occasionally there were lines that read differently now. You're spiraling again. Please get help. This isn't healthy. At the time, I thought she was concerned. Now I wondered if she was documenting. Friday evening, I picked up my daughter, Emma, from Laura's townhouse. Emma ran into my arms like she always did. Dad, she whispered against my shoulder. Mom says you're sad a lot. I crouched down to her height. Do I seem sad? She thought about it. Sometimes. Quiet. Quiet. Not unstable. Not scary. Just quiet. Inside the house, Laura watched us from the kitchen. I told her you've been stressed, she said, calmly. That's not what she said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Kids interpret things. So do courts. Her expression hardened for a fraction of a second. You think this is about money, she said. I think this is about narrative. She walked closer, lowering her voice. If you dig into finances in the middle of custody, it will look retaliatory. Only if there's something to hide. That landed. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she said, Be careful, Ethan. It wasn't a threat, but it wasn't kindness either. That weekend, Emma and I built a small bookshelf for her room at my apartment. She held the screws carefully while I drilled. Dad, Mom says you don't sleep much. I sleep enough. She said when people don't sleep, they make bad choices. I paused. Did Mom tell you that? Emma nodded. The drill felt heavier in my hand. This wasn't just legal language. It was shaping perception. Sunday evening, as Emma dropped off, Laura stood in the doorway. Dr. Holt emailed, she said. She wants collateral contacts. Meaning? People who can speak about our parenting. I nodded slowly. Good, she said. I've already listed 2. Who? My brother and my neighbor. Of course. Derek had already shown up twice since the hearing, offering advice, asking careful questions. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now I did. That night, Daniel called. There's something else, he said. What?
The court clerk forwarded a supplemental filing from Laura's attorney. My stomach tightened. What kind of filing? A request for temporary exclusive control of joint assets pending evaluation. Exclusive control. She claims you've been monitoring accounts in an obsessive manner. I closed my eyes. This is coordinated, I said quietly. Yes. Daniel paused. And Ethan? What? She attached 3 screenshots of your bank login history, timestamps at 2 a.m. I exhaled slowly. I couldn't sleep. I know, but optics matter. Silence filled the line. She's building instability through behavior patterns, not events, patterns. That word again. I stared at the ceiling of my apartment. This wasn't about proving I was dangerous. It was about suggesting I was unpredictable, suggesting doubt, and doubt in custody cases spreads fast. The next morning, I received a notification from the bank. A new transfer had been scheduled, from our joint savings to an account I didn't recognize. I froze. The transfer was dated 2 days from now. I hadn't authorized it, which meant one thing. Laura had just tried to move money after the judge had already raised the issue. I called Daniel immediately. She's either reckless, he said carefully, or she thinks she still controls the narrative. I stared at the confirmation email. This wasn't subtle anymore. This was timing. And if the court was about to conduct a financial review, this transfer wouldn't just look suspicious, it would look deliberate. For the first time since the hearing, I didn't feel defensive. I felt certain. Laura wasn't afraid of being exposed. She was afraid of losing control. And if she was willing to risk a transfer now, then maybe the instability she was warning the court about wasn't mine.
I didn't cancel the transfer. Daniel told me not to. Let it process, he said, but document everything. Don't confront her. That part was getting harder. The transfer was scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. At 8:57, I was staring at my laptop screen. At 9:01, the money was gone. $7,800. Not catastrophic, but not small. The receiving account was under a business name I didn't recognize. I forwarded the confirmation to Daniel. He replied within minutes. Do nothing. This is better than suspicion. Better. That word felt strange. 3 hours later, I got an email from Laura. Subject line, clarifying financial concern. She wrote in calm, professional language. The recent transfer was part of a scheduled tuition adjustment for Emma's private program. You were aware of this expense. I wasn't. There had been no conversation, no agreement. I called the school. They confirmed tuition had already been paid for the semester, in full. I sat back in my chair slowly. This wasn't miscommunication. This was misdirection. That afternoon, Dr. Holt called for my individual interview. Her office was quiet, minimal decor, soft lighting, no framed affirmations on the wall. She didn't smile excessively. She didn't lean too far forward. She simply said, "Tell me how the word unstable made you feel." I took a breath. Confused at first, then concerned. Concerned about what? That it wasn't about safety, it was about perception. She nodded slightly. Have you ever sought therapy? Yes. When? After the separation. For what reason? To manage stress. Were you diagnosed? No. She wrote something down. Did you monitor your wife's spending? I reviewed joint accounts. At what frequency? More often after I noticed inconsistencies. Late at night? Yes. She looked up. Why at night? Because that's when the house was quiet. And what were you looking for? The truth. She didn't react to that. Instead, she asked, did you ever threaten her with financial exposure? No. Did you ever suggest she was stealing? Yes. Why? Because I believed she was moving money without explanation. Another note. She leaned back. Do you believe your wife is manipulating the court? There it was, the question everyone was circling. I believe she's framing behavior instead of facts. And your financial concerns? I believe they're relevant. Dr. Holt closed her notebook. I'm not a forensic accountant, but timing matters in custody cases. I will request financial documentation. I nodded. That evening, Laura called unexpectedly. I heard you contacted the school, she said. I did. You're escalating. I'm clarifying. Silence. You're making this worse for Emma. Am I? Her voice lowered slightly. Dr. Holt asked me today why I left Emma with you so frequently if I was concerned about instability. And what did you say? That I was trying to protect her gradually. I closed my eyes. Laura. What? If I was unstable, you wouldn't have left her with me, not even once. She didn't answer. Instead, she said something else. I spoke with Derek. That name again. He thinks this financial angle will backfire on you. Does he? He thinks it makes you look obsessive. I felt something shift. Why is your brother advising you on custody strategy? Because he cares, or because he's involved? That landed harder than I expected. Her breathing changed slightly. You're spiraling, she said softly. No, I'm noticing. The call ended without goodbye. The next morning, Daniel called again. The business account your money went to, he said. Yes. It's registered under a consulting firm. Whose? Derek Vaughn. The room felt smaller. How much has been transferred to that account over the past year? I asked. Daniel exhaled slowly. Roughly $63,000. I stood up without realizing it. That's not tuition. No. Is it legal? Depends how it's framed. How is it framed? As strategic advisory services. For a moment, I said nothing. Derek had shown up at family dinners, offered investment advice, spoke about financial growth. I never imagined he was growing his own account with my money. Does Laura know? I asked. She authorized every transfer. The silence that followed wasn't explosive, it was clarifying. That afternoon, the court's temporary financial review officially began. A neutral accountant was assigned. Both parties were required to submit full records. Laura texted me, "You've made this ugly." I typed back carefully. I didn't move the money. 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, "You don't understand how this works." That sentence stayed with me, because maybe I didn't. Maybe I'd been reading it wrong. Later that night, I opened old emails between Laura and Derek. Shared spreadsheets, investment projections, payment schedules. I noticed something else. The dates of the largest transfers aligned with specific arguments Laura and I had. Arguments about custody, arguments about independence, arguments about control. The pattern wasn't random, it was timed. Every time I questioned her, money moved, as if she was building something behind the scenes, not recklessly, quietly, measured. I thought about the judge's question again. If he's unstable, why leave the child with him? That question didn't just expose inconsistency, it exposed motive. And if the financial review confirmed what I was seeing, then this case wouldn't be about my mental health anymore. It would be about her credibility. 3 days later, Dr. Holt requested a joint observation session. Laura and I would be in the same room with Emma and someone watching. Not to test stability, but to measure influence. And I had a feeling that's where the real narrative would crack.
Dr. Holt's office had a play area in the corner. Nothing bright, nothing loud, just blocks, a small table, colored pencils. Emma sat between Laura and me on a low rug. Dr. Holt observed quietly from a chair near the wall, not interrupting, not guiding. "Build something together," she had said. "Whatever feels natural." Emma picked up the blocks first. "Let's make a house." Laura smiled immediately. "That's perfect." I handed Emma a blue block. "You start." For a few minutes, everything felt almost normal. Emma stacked pieces carefully. Laura adjusted one slightly when it leaned. Then Emma looked at me. "Dad, remember when you checked the money late at night?" The room shifted. I kept my voice even. "Yes." "Mom said that's why she worries." Laura didn't look at me. She looked at Emma. "That's not what I said," she corrected softly. "I said when people don't sleep well, they feel stressed." Emma frowned slightly. "You said it made you nervous." Dr. Holt didn't move, but she was writing. I focused on Emma. "Did I ever scare you?" She shook her head. "Did I ever yell at you?" "No." "Then what made Mom nervous?" Laura inhaled slowly. "Emma, sometimes adults have disagreements." Dr. Holt finally spoke. "Mrs. Carter, let Emma answer in her own words." Laura's posture stiffened. Emma looked down at the blocks. "Mom said if you get upset about money again, things could change." My hand stayed still. "What kind of change?" I asked gently. Emma shrugged, like I wouldn't stay here as much. Laura's jaw tightened. "That's not how I said it." Dr. Holt wrote again. The observation ended 20 minutes later. Outside in the hallway, Laura turned toward me. "You coached her." "No." "You've been talking about finances in front of her." "I haven't. She doesn't say things like that on her own. She does if she hears them." For the first time since this began, her calm cracked slightly. "You're trying to paint me as manipulative." "I'm not painting anything." Her voice dropped. "If you continue down this road, it will get messy." "It already is." That afternoon, the forensic accountant emailed preliminary findings to both attorneys. Daniel called immediately. "It's worse than we thought." "How?" "The transfers to Derek's company weren't labeled tuition or advisory services in the internal notes." "What were they labeled?" "Asset protection." I felt something cold move through my chest. Protection from what? From marital division. The silence that followed was heavy. "She's been moving money out of shared visibility," Daniel said carefully, "for at least 10 months. Before the separation? Yes. Which meant the instability claim came after, not before." That night, Laura sent a long email. It wasn't angry. It wasn't defensive. It was strategic. "You're forcing this into something it doesn't need to be," she wrote. "The financial transfers were planning measures. Derek advised that in the event of divorce, early asset structuring prevents litigation complications." Early asset structuring. "Before we even filed?" I replied. Her answer came quickly. "You've been distant for years. I needed to prepare." Prepare? For what? I read the email 3 times. There was no apology, no denial, just reframing. The next morning, the judge scheduled an emergency hearing, temporary financial freeze, review of custody arrangement pending final findings. In the courtroom again, Laura looked smaller, not defeated, but exposed. Her attorney spoke first. "Your Honor, the financial structuring was precautionary, not deceptive." The judge looked down at the documents. Precautionary against what? Potential instability. There was again. Daniel stood. "Your Honor, the funds were moved before any documented instability claims. In fact, before separation discussions were initiated." The judge's eyes shifted to Laura. "Mrs. Carter, did you anticipate divorce prior to filing?" Laura hesitated. "Yes." "And did you discuss this anticipation with your husband?" "No." "And instead moved shared funds to your brother's company. It was advisory, without disclosure?" Silence. The judge leaned back. Financial concealment undermines credibility, particularly paired with claims of instability. Laura's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. This wasn't dramatic.
No one raised their voice, no one cried, but something fundamental shifted in that room. The judge ordered full disclosure, immediate halt to transfers, temporary shared custody unchanged, and then she said something that landed quietly but firmly. Accusations of instability require more than timing and interpretation. After court, Laura didn't approach me. She walked straight past. But Derek didn't. He waited near the exit. "You're playing a dangerous game," he said softly. "I didn't move the money. You don't understand the strategy. Explain it." He studied me for a long moment. Laura was protecting her future. By labeling me unstable? His expression flickered. That wasn't my advice. There it was. Not denial. Distancing. "So whose idea was it?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "If you keep pushing, you'll burn everything down." I watched him walk away. For months, I thought this was about me defending myself, about proving I wasn't unstable. But it wasn't. It was about something Laura had built quietly, a financial shield, a narrative shield, layered together. And now both were cracking. 3 days later, Dr. Holt submitted her interim report. Daniel forwarded it without comment. I opened the document slowly. Findings: no clinical instability observed. Child expresses secure attachment to both parents. Notable concern regarding adult narrative influence on child perception. Adult narrative influence. That phrase lingered, because it didn't accuse, it didn't dramatize, it simply pointed. And for the first time since Laura used the word unstable, the weight shifted fully. Not onto her guilt, but onto her intention. The final custody ruling was scheduled for 2 weeks later, and this time, it wouldn't hinge on perception, it would hinge on credibility.
The final hearing didn't feel dramatic. No reporters, no raised voices, just paperwork, quiet breathing, and the steady scratch of pens against legal pads. Emma wasn't present this time. The judge had decided it was unnecessary. Laura sat across from me again. Same navy blazer, same careful posture, but something was different. Less certainty. The financial audit had been completed 2 days earlier. Daniel placed a thin binder on the table in front of us. Laura didn't look at it. The judge entered. We stood, then sat. "Mrs. Carter," the judge began calmly, "the court has reviewed the full financial disclosure and the custody evaluator's report." Laura's hands were folded neatly, too neatly. The funds transferred to Mr. Vaughn's consulting firm totaled $84,000 over a 10-month period. 84. More than Daniel initially estimated. These transfers occurred prior to the filing of separation, the judge continued, and were not disclosed to Mr. Carter. Laura's attorney shifted slightly, but said nothing. The judge looked up. In parallel, Mrs. Carter initiated a claim of emotional instability. The word felt smaller now, less powerful. However, the judge continued, the custody evaluation found no evidence supporting that claim. Instead, it noted repeated instances of narrative influence directed toward the child. Laura inhaled sharply. The judge's tone remained measured. The court does not view financial preparation for divorce as inherently malicious. However, concealment paired with destabilizing accusations raises concerns about intent. Intent. That was the word that mattered. Daniel didn't stand this time. He didn't need to. The documents spoke. The transfers labeled asset protection. The emails discussing early structuring. The timing of instability claims after financial confrontation. The judge turned directly to Laura. "Mrs. Carter, did you believe your husband posed a risk to your child?" Laura's answer came quickly. "No." Not unstable. Not dangerous. No. Then why use that language in court? Silence. Real silence.
Not strategic, not rehearsed, just empty. Laura's voice, when it came, was softer. I felt cornered. The judge waited. I believed he would try to take control of everything, the money, the house, custody. So you preemptively framed him as unstable? Her attorney shifted. Your Honor. The judge raised a hand gently. I'm asking her. Laura's composure finally cracked, but only slightly. I didn't think it would go this far. That was the first honest sentence she had spoken. The judge nodded once. Words used in this court have consequences, especially when they involve a parent's mental stability. Laura looked down at the table. The ruling came without theatrics. Joint legal custody maintained, equal parenting time preserved, financial restitution ordered for the concealed transfers, and a clear statement entered into the record. Mr. Carter is not clinically unstable. The court finds no evidence of risk. No apology, no punishment beyond restitution, just correction. Outside the courtroom, Laura didn't approach me, but Derek did. He stood near the stairs, hands in his coat pockets. You won, he said quietly. I didn't lose, I replied. He studied me for a moment. You could have settled. I offered transparency. He nodded once. Laura panicked. Why? He hesitated. Because when you started questioning the transfers, it threatened more than the money. What else? He didn't answer directly. Control feels safe, especially when you think you're about to lose it. Then he walked away. Laura's attorney handled the financial arrangements over the following weeks. $84,000 returned to the joint account. Consulting firm dissolved. Paperwork cleaned up quietly. Emma never knew the details. She just noticed something else. The tension was different, less sharp, less whispered. One evening, as she sat at my kitchen table doing homework, she looked up. Mom doesn't say you're sad anymore, she said. What does she say? She says adults get stressed sometimes. I nodded slowly. That's true. Are you still quiet? Sometimes. She smiled. I like quiet. So did I. The label had faded, not dramatically, not publicly, but legally, officially. That mattered. Laura and I met once more before the divorce finalized. No attorneys, just a conference room in a mediator's office. She looked tired, not defeated, just worn. I didn't expect you to push back, she said. I didn't expect to need to. Silence settled between us. I thought if I controlled the finances, I controlled the outcome. And the instability claim? Her jaw tightened slightly. I needed leverage. There it was. Not fear, not protection, leverage. I never wanted to hurt you, she said quietly. I know. And I never believed you were dangerous. I know. She looked at me carefully. You were just unpredictable. I was asking questions. She didn't argue. The divorce finalized without spectacle. Joint custody, fair division, no lingering claims. The word unstable never appeared in the final order. Months later, sometimes I replayed the moment in court. The judge's single question. If he's unstable, why leave the child with him? It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't aggressive, it was simple. And that simplicity unraveled everything. Laura didn't try to destroy me, she tried to secure herself. But in doing so, she underestimated something. Calm persistence, documentation, silence. She thought instability could be suggested, but credibility had to be earned. And once the court started measuring facts instead of language, the narrative shifted. Not loudly, not explosively, just enough. I didn't win. There was no trophy, no applause, just balance restored. And sometimes that's all justice looks like. Quiet, final, measured.